The Harry Potter universe has healers who can regrow bones overnight, cure the common cold with a single potion, and heal deep wounds without leaving a scar. Yet, they watched millions of Muggles die from diseases they could have wiped out in an afternoon. That's the uncomfortable truth about the wizarding world that nobody in the Harry Potter universe wants to talk about. J.K. Rowling confirmed it herself. She said, and I'm quoting directly, "Wizards would have the power to correct or override mundane nature, but not magical nature. Therefore, a wizard could catch anything a Muggle might catch, but he would cure all of it. All of it. Every mundane disease that has ever ravaged the human population, from the Black Plague to smallpox to the flu pandemic of 1918. Wizards had the theoretical power to cure, and they just didn't. They let it happen. And when we say cure, we're not talking about Muggle-style recovery where you take pills for 2 weeks and hope for the best. Wizarding medicine is absurdly powerful. Essence of Dittany can close an open wound and regrow fresh skin on the spot. Hermione used it on Ron after he got splinched during apparition, and the gash that was raw flesh moments earlier looked days old within seconds. A bezoar, which is literally a stone pulled from a goat's stomach, acts as an antidote to most known poisons. Harry shoved one down Ron's throat in 6th year after he drank poisoned mead, and it saved his life in about 30 seconds. Mandrake Restorative Draught can reverse full-body petrification. It brought back every student the basilisk paralyzed in Chamber of Secrets. Wiggenweld Potion can wake someone from magically induced death-like sleep. And then there are Phoenix Tears, which neutralize basilisk venom in Harry's bloodstream, one of the most lethal substances in the entire wizarding world in real time. These aren't experimental treatments or cutting-edge breakthroughs. They're standard supplies. Madame Pomfrey keeps most of them in a school's nurse's office, next to the cough drops and calming draughts. A school nurse has access to medicine more powerful than anything in the most advanced hospital on the planet, and the wizarding world decided that 72 million people on the other side of the wall didn't deserve any of it. Now, before you grab your pitchforks and march on the Ministry of Magic, this story is far more complicated and far more tragic than it first appears. Because the wizarding world didn't always turn its back on Muggles. There was a time, centuries ago, when witches and wizards lived openly alongside their non-magical neighbors. They helped them, healed them, used their gifts for the benefit of everyone around them. And then, everything changed. To understand how, we need to go back to a children's story. Not just any children's story either. If you read the Tales of Beetle the Bard, you'll remember The Wizard and the Hopping Pot. In Beetle's original version, a kind elderly wizard uses his magic to help his Muggle neighbors, brewing potions and antidotes in what he calls his lucky cooking pot. He heals the sick, fixes problems, and acts as the village doctor, except his medicine actually works every single time. When the old wizard dies, he leaves everything to his son. But the son doesn't share his father's generosity. He thinks people who can't use magic are worthless, beneath him. So he refuses to help, and the pot, animated by the father's enchantment, begins to torment the son, hopping after him and making his life miserable until he finally gives in and starts helping the Muggles again. The moral is obvious. Use magic altruistically. Help those who need it. Share your gifts. But here's the dark part. That story was suppressed. During the centuries of Muggle persecution of witches and wizards, the original pro-Muggle version was systematically destroyed by the wizarding community, replaced with an anti-Muggle version where the Muggles are portrayed as greedy and dangerous. That rewritten version became the one wizarding parents told their children for generations. They literally rewrote their own fairy tales to teach kids that helping Muggles was foolish. Think about what that means. The wizarding world stopped helping Muggles and then culturally reprogrammed themselves to believe that helping Muggles was wrong. They took a story whose entire point was use your power to help others and flipped it into stay away from those people. Generational trauma weaponized into ideology and passed down through bedtime stories. And here's the part that makes this personal for the Potter family. Because that story about the kind old wizard helping his Muggle neighbors, it might have been based on a real person. In the 12th century, a wizard named Linfred of Stinchcombe lived in a small village in Gloucestershire, and he did exactly what the old man in The Wizard and the Hopping Pot did. He brewed potions and remedies for his Muggle neighbors, who thought he was just a lovable old gardener playing with funny plants. They had no idea his herbal remedies were actual magic. They called him the Potterer because he was always pottering about in his garden, and over time that nickname got shortened to Potter. Linfred of Stinchcombe is the founding ancestor of Harry Potter's entire family line. The remedies he first developed eventually evolved into Skellygrow and Pepper Up Potion, two of the most widely used healing potions in the modern wizarding world. The Potter fortune didn't literally come from healing muggles for free. Linfred later sold his cures to witches and wizards. But the roots of the family name and the roots of that fortune still begin with a wizard helping non-magical neighbors who had no idea they were being treated with magic. The very name Potter exists because a wizard once chose to help, and by the time his most famous descendant was born, the world had made that kind of help illegal. And it all leads to the big one, the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy, first signed in 1689 and officially established in 1692. This law was laid down by the International Confederation of Wizards to hide the existence of magic from the entire non-magical world, born entirely out of fear. During the 15th century, Muggles began to fear magic, and witch hunts spread across Europe. Young witches and wizards, the ones who couldn't fully control their powers yet, were especially vulnerable. They were being captured and killed. Meanwhile, other Muggles didn't want to destroy wizards. They wanted to exploit them, demanding that witches and wizards use magic for personal gain, for power, for war. Wizards tried to work within the system first. Around 1690, a delegation actually approached the British monarchs William and Mary and asked for legal protection of the wizarding population under Muggle law. They were refused, and then the Salem witch trials happened in 1692, and that was the tipping point. The message was clear. Muggles would never accept them, not peacefully. And nowhere was that lesson learned more severely than in America. In the aftermath of the Salem witch trials, MACUSA, the Magical Congress of the United States of America, the American equivalent of the Ministry of Magic, enacted Rappaport's Law, which went even further than the International Statute of Secrecy. Rappaport's law banned any and all fraternization between wizards and non-magical people, not just exposure of magic. American wizards couldn't even be friends with Muggles, let alone heal them. It remained in force for over a century, a direct scar left by Salem on the entire magical culture of a nation. So, the wizarding world did the only thing it felt it could do. It vanished completely. Every witch, every wizard, every magical creature, every hospital, every school, gone, hidden behind enchantments and secrecy so thorough that within a few generations, Muggles genuinely believed magic was fictional. And with that vanishing came a rule that changed everything. You do not reveal magic to Muggles, period. No exceptions. You don't heal them. You don't help them. You don't let them know you exist, because the last time they knew, they tried to burn you alive. And staying hidden isn't a passive thing either. The Ministry of Magic dedicates an entire department, Level 3, the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, just to keeping Muggles in the dark. The Obliviator headquarters employs trained specialists whose full-time job is erasing Muggle memories. Every time a Muggle spots a flying car, stumbles into a magical duel, or notices a dragon overhead, an Obliviator shows up and wipes the last few hours from their brain. Working alongside them is the Muggle-Worthy Excuse Committee, a team whose entire professional purpose is inventing fake explanations for things Muggles accidentally witness. When Peter Pettigrew blew up a street and killed 12 Muggles in 1981, the committee told the press it was a gas explosion, and if a magical accident is too big for either team to handle, the Office of Misinformation steps in and coordinates directly with the Muggle Prime Minister. This is an industrial-scale operation. Hundreds of witches and wizards wake up every morning and go to work specifically to make sure the non-magical world stays ignorant. The irony is staggering. Wizards don't lift a wand to cure a Muggle child's illness, but they'll deploy an entire government department to make sure that child's parents forgot they ever saw a broomstick. Now here's where the numbers make this even more painful. Rowling has stated that there are about 3,000 witches and wizards in all of Britain. 3,000. Britain's Muggle population today sits at about 72 million, which means magical people make up roughly 0.004% of the population. 42 in every million. That's the entire magical population of a major country. So, even if they wanted to help, even if they threw the Statute of Secrecy in the garbage tomorrow, how exactly would 3,000 people cure the diseases of 72 million? Logistically, it's a nightmare. These aren't assembly line workers. They're individual healers brewing complex potions and casting intricate spells. Skellygrow takes an entire agonizing night to regrow bones in a single patient. Blood replenishing potion has to be administered repeatedly. Pepper up potion cures the common cold, sure. But someone still has to brew it, bottle it, and hand it to each sick person one at a time. 3,000 wizards trying to secretly cure 72 million muggles while maintaining the secrecy that keeps them alive isn't just difficult, it's functionally impossible. But let's say they tried anyway. Let's say they declared, forget secrecy, people are dying, let's help. That's when the story of Carlotta Pinkstone becomes important. During the 20th century, Carlotta publicly campaigned for the repeal of the Statute of Secrecy. She wanted muggles to know about magic. She wanted wizards to help openly. And what happened? She was imprisoned multiple times by her own government for the crime of wanting to help people. The wizarding world didn't just have a law against revealing magic. They actively punished anyone who tried to change the law. The system was actively hostile to the very idea of helping muggles. And think about what this means for muggle-born witches and wizards, the ones who grew up on the other side of the wall. A kid spends 11 years in the muggle world, surrounded by hospitals and ambulances and fundraisers for cancer research. They watch relatives get sick. They see the news about pandemics. Then they get their Hogwarts letter, walk into the wizarding world, and discover that a school nurse can mend a shattered arm in about 8 seconds. The psychological whiplash of that realization must be enormous. And yet, there's no record of any Muggle-born witch or wizard ever seriously challenging the system. Hermione Granger spent years campaigning for house elf rights with SPEW, knitting hats and leaving them around the common room, but she never once questioned why magical medicine couldn't reach Muggle hospitals. Lily Evans grew up in Cokeworth, a working-class Muggle neighborhood, became one of the most talented witches of her generation, and never tried to smuggle a vial of pepper-up potion back to her old neighbors. The system absorbs Muggle-born so completely that even the ones who remember what life is like without magic accept the rules. By the time they graduate, they've been fully assimilated. The wall between worlds holds because everyone on the magical side, including the ones who came from the other side, agrees to keep it standing. And then there's the case that genuinely makes my blood boil. Ariana Dumbledore. As a young girl, Ariana was spotted doing magic by a group of Muggle boys. They attacked her, tortured her, and the trauma was so severe that it essentially broke her, leaving her unable to control her magic for the rest of her tragically short life. Her family couldn't report those boys to Muggle authorities because that would mean explaining why they attacked her, which would mean revealing magic. They couldn't seek justice through the wizard legal system because the Statute of Secrecy meant those muggles were essentially untouchable. So, Albus Dumbledore's father, Percival, did the only thing he felt he could. He hunted those boys down himself. For that, he was arrested and thrown in Azkaban, where he died. He didn't get justice for his daughter. He got punished for seeking it. The Statute of Secrecy didn't just prevent wizards from helping muggles, it prevented wizards from protecting their own children. This is the climate that produced Grindelwald, and understanding that context is what makes Grindelwald so genuinely terrifying, because his argument made a twisted kind of sense. In 1926 and 1927, the exact period we see dramatized in the Fantastic Beast films, Grindelwald stood before his followers and said the Statute of Secrecy protects muggles more than it protects wizards. He told them that they had the power to fix the world and were forbidden from using it. He showed them a vision of what was coming, World War II, the bombs, the devastation, the Holocaust, and said this is what happens when we don't intervene. And in Fantastic Beasts, we see precisely how Grindelwald recruited. He didn't just appeal to supremacist purebloods, he exploited the broken and the desperate, people like Credence Barebone, an Obscurial, a young wizard whose suppressed magic had turned into something monstrous and destructive. Credence was the product of a world where magical children were hidden, shamed, and crushed. Grindelwald weaponized that suffering, using Credence as a tool while telling him he was finally being given a home. It's the most revealing window into how Grindelwald actually operated, not as an idealist, but as a predator who wrapped genocide in the language of liberation. A young Albus Dumbledore, brilliant and grieving and furious about what happened to his sister, was briefly seduced by the exact argument. In his letter to Grindelwald, Dumbledore wrote, "Your point about wizard dominance being for the Muggles' own good. This, I think, is the crucial point. Yes, we have been given power, And yes, that power gives us the right to rule, but it also gives us responsibilities over the ruled. That's Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of the age, the champion of Muggle rights. Even he, briefly in his youth, believed that wizards should rule over Muggles for the greater good. That's how seductive this argument becomes when you actually sit with it. If you can cure every disease and every war and prevent every atrocity, don't you have a moral obligation to do so? And if the only thing stopping you is a 300-year-old law born from fear, shouldn't you break it? We know how Grindelwald's story ends. His true goal was dominance dressed in idealism. When his lieutenant, Vinda Rosier, casually announced that their new order would mean the destruction of all Muggles, Grindelwald didn't disagree. He just told her that they didn't say such things out loud. The quiet part was always there. He just knew better than to lead with it. And Rowling drew the parallel deliberately. Grindelwald's global wizarding war ended in 1945, the same year as World War II. The man who argued that wizards should intervene in Muggle affairs for moral reasons turned out to be the magical world's equivalent of Hitler. So, you can understand why the wizarding world grew even more cautious after that. Every time someone suggests helping Muggles, the response is essentially, that's exactly what Grindelwald said. But something complicated the picture even further. There's actually evidence that wizarding medicine might not be as universally superior as we assume. The healthcare system of the wizarding and Muggle worlds split apart over 300 years ago, long before modern medicine existed. Wizards have no reason to understand germ theory. They don't study pathology. They don't need to, because they have their own magical methods. But those methods were developed for magical people in a magical context. Remember when Arthur Weasley was bitten by Nagini? The healers at St. Mungo's couldn't close the wound because it was magically inflicted. A trainee healer named Augustus Pye actually suggested trying stitches, the Muggle approach, and Molly Weasley was horrified. Ron, bless him, captured the entire wizarding attitude perfectly when Harry asked if healers were like doctors. Doctors, Ron said. Those Muggle maniacs who cut people up? Of course not. That's the cultural divide in one sentence. Wizards think Muggle medicine is barbaric. Muggles think magic is fictional. Neither side truly understands what the other is capable of. And it works both ways. Wizards have their own diseases that Muggle doctors would be completely helpless against. Dragonpox has been killing magical people since at least the 14th century. The first recorded death was a wizard named Chauncey Oldridge in 1379, and it still carries off elderly witches and wizards in the modern era. Harry's own grandparents, Fleamont and Euphemia Potter, both died of dragonpox shortly after James married Lily, which is why Harry never met them. Abraxas Malfoy, Draco's grandfather, died of it too. Then there's Spattergroit, a highly contagious disease that causes purple pustules so severe it can leave the patient bedridden for months. Ron's family had a great aunt who had it, and the portrait of the old healer at St. Mungo's recommends standing naked in a barrel of eel's eyes under a full moon as a cure, which tells you roughly how well the wizarding medical community understands it. Scrofungulus, a magical fungal infection, causes tiny tentacles to erupt across the neck and can be fatal if the immune system collapses. 300 years of separation means each world developed medicine for its own problems and has almost zero understanding of the others. Muggle antibiotics mean nothing to a wizard with dragonpox, and a cauldron full of pepper-up potion wouldn't help a Muggle doctor figure out what Spattergroit even is. To be fair, St. Mungo's does occasionally treat Muggles. It's rare, but it happens. When Muggles fall prey to magical attacks or ailments, like the two who lost fingers to Willie Widdershin's enchanted doorknobs, they're admitted and treated. But it's always reactive, never proactive. Wizards will fix what magic broke. They won't cure what nature caused. That's the line. There's even a hint that during World War II, things might have been different. A Wombat aptitude test mentions that a secret task force of wizards and Muggles may have helped the Allies to victory. Whether it's true or not, the ambiguity feels intentional. The wizarding world can't even admit to itself whether it helped during humanity's darkest hour. And that's really the heart of it. The wizarding world built a system where helping Muggles is illegal, where advocating for that help gets you imprisoned, where the only people who publicly argue for intervention are dark wizards using it as cover for genocide, and where the cultural memory of persecution runs so deep that even fairy tales were rewritten to justify isolation. Is the Statute of Secrecy necessary? Probably, at least to some degree. The history of Muggle-wizard relations genuinely is violent. The persecution was real, the fear was earned, and with only 3,000 wizards in all of Britain, exposure could could genuinely mean extinction. But does that make it right? 3,000 people who can cure any mundane disease sitting behind their enchantments while the world around them suffers from illnesses that a single potion could eliminate. Children dying of diseases that Madame Pomfrey could cure before lunch. Pandemics raging while Pepper Up Potion sits in stockrooms at St. Mungo's. Wars being fought while wizards who could stop them watch through enchanted windows and quietly shake their heads. The uncomfortable truth about the wizarding world is that it's not a fairy tale. It's a perfectly human story about fear, self-preservation, and the moral compromises people make when they're terrified. Wizards didn't stop helping Muggles because they're evil. They stopped because they were scared. And then they built laws and institutions and rewrote children's stories to make sure they never had to feel guilty about it. Dumbledore spent his entire adult life regretting that moment when he nearly became Grindelwald. He dedicated himself to protecting Muggles, to fighting for coexistence, but even he never challenged the Statute of Secrecy itself. Even the greatest champion of Muggle rights in wizarding history accepted the fundamental premise that wizards must remain hidden, that helping openly was too dangerous. And maybe he was right. Maybe there's no version of this story where 3,000 wizards reveal themselves to 72 million Muggles and it ends well. Maybe the statute really is the least terrible option in a world full of terrible options. But every time a Muggle child dies of a disease that a wizard could cure with a flick of a wand, the question hangs in the air: is our safety worth their lives? Because the wizarding world answered that question a long time ago, and they chose themselves. That's the darkest tragic in the Harry Potter universe, the quiet, institutionalized, perfectly legal decision to let the world suffer because helping might cost you something. And the really haunting part? It's not that different from the choices we make in the real world every single day. Now, why are there no scientists in the wizarding world? That's your next lesson here at Stickman Hogwarts. Click now before the ministry obliviates your curiosity.